Today we're going to be looking at the RACES strategy. And if you'll remember, in RACES, the R stands for restate, where you restate the prompt. The A stands for answer, where you give your answer. The C stands for cite evidence, your proof. The E stands for explain. Explain your answer and how your evidence fits with it. And then S is where you sum it up. So let's look at our question today. Explain how the author's use in word choice helps figure out the tone of the account. So, let's go ahead and read our story. And we're going to be looking at Don't Let the Bedbugs Bite by Nick Marcus. Bedbugs are a nuisance that spread quickly. So if you find bedbugs in your home, you owe it to yourself and others to take decisive and immediate action. The scientific name for these tiny blood-sucking insects is Cimex lectularis. They're called bedbugs because they mainly feed on blood at night while their hosts are asleep. They are like an army of minuscule vampires. Places like mattresses, couches, and chairs serve as luxurious havens in which thousands of them can live. The bedbugs insert a syringe-like proboscis through the host's skin. It takes between 3 and 10 minutes for the bug to drink its fill through this slender appendix. Its bite is small and painless, so the victim rarely wakes during this feeding time. Bedbugs are not known for disseminating disease, but the bumps they leave behind can become infected. Also, the saliva they release into the skin can make you itch so badly you'll want to scratch your skin off. Bedbug infections can appear to be a blanket of crawling pinholes that cover the place where you rest. The teensy pests often hitch rides on suitcases left in hotel rooms and travel home with unwitting victims. So keep your luggage off the floor when you travel and wash your clothes in hot water when you get home. Use a flashlight and a magnifying glass to scrutinize your mattress. If you find any evidence of bedbugs, destroy the mattress immediately and call a professional exterminator. You owe it to your neighbors and fellow travelers not to spread the bedbug headache. So, now that we've read this story, and even as I read this story, I could already kind of pick up on the tone as I read it. So let's look at it. Let's go back to our prompt. Now, they're asking us to explain how the author's use in word choice helps us figure out the tone of the account. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and restate my prompt. That's usually how I start. So, when I'm restating my prompt, it's very important that let's identify the verb here. The verb that we're going to have to do is to explain how. So, that's what we're going to do. So, you don't restate the verb. That's just what you're going to do. So, I explain how is my verb. So, I'm going to start off by saying the author. Let me release indent. The author's use of words. So I've restated my prompt. Now, I need to look at this prompt and figure out what they're wanting. I know that I'm going to have to explain, but what am I have to explain? Well, I'm looking at word choice. So I'm looking at, let's use a little thing. So I'm looking at, I box my verbs, explain. I'm looking at the author's use in word choice and how it helps figure out what? The tone. So there's a couple words here. I know word choice is the author's words that he uses in a story. And then I have to know tone. Well, tone means like the mood, the feeling you can relate to it. So let's go back, and we need to come up with the answer before we can even start typing an answer. So let's look at our story. Now, let's go back to the first page. We're going to be having to look for these words that let us see the feeling or the mood of the author here. So we're going to see if we can circle some. So from looking at this story, I noticed nuisance. Okay? Is that a positive or negative? Well, that's a negative word. Nuisance is usually something that's annoying. Okay? And if I keep going, I noticed vampires. He describes them as vampires. And in this case, he goes on to talk about how they will, when they get in your skin, they suck your blood. So that's a negative thing. And if I keep going, he describes the people as victims. So if they're a victim because of bed bugs, that would be a negative connotation. So let's keep looking. I think that's mostly the ones on that page. So let's go to the next page. And let's continue. Some more words that we would look at would be crawling pinholes. That gives me a kind of ooh feeling. There once again, victim. He describes them as victims. And also he goes on to say that it would be a headache. Well, that's a negative terminology. So that would be negative because they caused you to have a headache. So all those words that I've underlined from both stories, from both pages of the story, are all negative things. So I can already kind of determine that when I'm looking at this answer, I know that it's going to be a negative tone because all those words that the author used, those connotative words, let me see that it's negative. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Now that I've restated my question, I have to give an answer. The author's use of the words is, and we're going to say slightly, or you could just say negative. Negative. Now, I have to give proof that it's negative. So, and we're going to have to go take it a step further from there. But let's look. Well, how do we know it's negative? They said the author's use of word choice. What words? Well, as we went back in the story, which I wish it would stay underlined, but it didn't. If you'll remember, we had underlined several words that proved that it was negative. He kept using words like, we said, vampire. He used words like victim. So let's look at our problem. We would have underlined and kept them all underlined. So all you would have to do would be to copy them over onto your page. So let's look at it. So we can say he uses words such as, now if you'll notice, I put a quotation mark. Now, I'm about to say, for example, nuisance. That was the first word that he used to describe them was nuisance. Now, I have to put that in quotation marks because those were the author's words. So remember, you have to give credit to the author here. So this is like my evidence. But words can be evidence as well, but you have to give your quotation mark so that the author gets credit. Pest, there's another one. Victims, that was one of the ones we talked about. Remember we said it was a headache. Headache. Sorry, my typing skills. And the other one that we mentioned was crawling pinholes. Well, I can think of another one I forgot. And I'll just go back and add it here. Also, remember he described them as vampires. And if you'll notice, you may say, well, that's a lot of words. Do we have to use all of these words? Well, honestly, the more evidence that you have, the better off that you are proving your point. And in this case, all of these words all show that negative tone. So we would want to use all of these words. So the more evidence you have, the more you can justify your answer here. So we've used all the words that we can come up with. So that would be our evidence to show that the tone is negative. But we can take it a step further. And that goes back to races we've restated. So let's see here. And I like to label it as I'm doing it because it helps. So we've restated the author's use. That's where I've restated it. That's my R. Actually, the author's use of words. Okay? Slightly negative, that's part of my answer. So that's the A. This is all my evidence. That's the C. Now I have to explain, and I'm going to elaborate on my answer a little more. So, now, from all these words, we can determine, to do this is back out. That by using these words, let's be more detailed. It's not just a negative tone. What kind of tone is it? Well, nuisance, that means you're kind of pest. Those are all annoying. Like you're annoyed with it. So it sounds like the author is annoyed with bed bugs. They get on his nerves. They cause a problem for him. Well, let's look. Victims, headache, vampires, crawling pinholes. Well, all those words make me kind of think, they make me kind of shiver, like in like a disgusting way. He's disgusting with them. So we can see that not only is it a negative tone, but it's more of a annoying and disgusted tone. So we need to say that. So all of these, words, or all of these word choices, using the words that the author used in the prompt, show a tone of disgust and annoyance for who? Well, for the bed bugs, or you could say for these creatures. You could use either terminology you want. So let's make sure before we're done. So this would be a restate. This is our answer. Here's our evidence, and then we've explained it. In fact, we've kind of even elaborated on our answer, because we can't just say it's a negative tone. We need to have some adjectives to describe it. In this case, it would be a tone of disgust and annoyance.